08/25/1999. I don't know who I am, Conrad. I mean it, I just don't know anymore. I just spent the last few hours talking to Sheriff Gerald, and let me tell you, he didn't hold any punches. Can't say I blame him though. He's been in my face twice in the month. He's seen one too many ambulances pull out of the rec center parking lot. I have too. They took Darby home. I saw them load him into the car and haul him away to his parents' place. I can't imagine what kind of hell is waiting for him there. I asked the sheriff to just let me walk home, but he argued a bit. Said I was lucky that they're letting me off at all, and that it would be silly to make me walk at all. He didn't drive me though. Instead, he walked me home. I think he could tell that I was going through it, and I'm sure that seeing my fingers didn't make him feel too much better. But he walked me home, and we just shot the shit. He was trying to get me laughing, I think. I was getting odd looks from him, like he pitied what had happened. He told me that things happen, and people do things that hurt other people, mostly because they want things. He said that me and Darby should come back in tomorrow, just for paperwork though. We don't have to worry about this after all the evidence is taken care of and everyone has said their piece. He asked if I was okay, but I told him I wasn't. He nodded, wiping at his mustache. The big bad sheriff, trying to play father all of a sudden. To be fair, after the hassle he'd put us through, I didn't expect him to open up like that. He talked about his kids, if I had seen them or if we had any classes together. It was pretty nice that time of the morning too. Piles of dead leaves raked onto the sidewalk, chilly air blowing all over. And we just walked in the sun, talking. Somewhere in the neighborhood, I swear, someone was baking something. The whole street smelled like cinnamon. I have to think about it. Let myself walk around in that sun and those leaves just a little longer. It was really nice. It was almost perfect, I guess. It reminded me of holidays you remember when you were a kid. Like I was living and breathing through a happy memory I had from some day long ago. Otherwise, I think I'd take a long walk off a short pier. After all that, seeing their faces in my head, not just that kid anymore, but Vince's and Barney's too. The screams, Conrad, the fucking splashing. Seeing Darby's crumpled body, that bright red trail of blood wrapped around his head and chin. The smell. God, that sweet motor oil smell. It's in here, swimming around my brain. Just writing about it now, I can feel it drifting up from inside. But I can't just think about this morning forever. Maybe when I'm finished, if I'm even able to bring that bright little feeling back. Maybe tomorrow, after I'm done staring into empty space. Maybe when I stop hearing that damn pool sloshing around. Then I'll sit down with Mimi, and I'll mull over that nice memory for a minute. I need that. I need something. Something really bad happened this morning, Conrad. The way the wreck felt, walking in the halls and opening the doors, it felt empty. It felt real for the first time in a real long while. But the place didn't seem so big anymore. It was just a bunch of drywall and furniture now, and I was the only real thing in the whole building. Wooden walls and pictures and frames, plastic sunflowers and tacky mosaic vases, all painted stale under that stupid fluorescent light. But me, I was in glorious Technicolor, like those old movie commercials say. My fingers didn't even hurt, not even when I wrenched the shed doors open. I waded through 2-foot-high piles of garbage and tools, kicking away dusty rags and empty cans of antifreeze. I almost didn't see the crates of pool chemicals. Instead, I nearly collapsed onto them in the dark. But they were there. Wooden boxes filled with chlorine bricks the size of my forearm. Clouds of dust came off of the lids as I hauled them into the back of the golf cart, giving me a bad cough for a few seconds. I knew that the battery had to be fixed back in place, and took a spare from the broken one. I didn't want to go back into the pool house without my trusty chlorine weapon just yet. I was at the hood when the car pulled up to the side gate. There were 2 bright headlights beaming down at me from beyond the chain-link fence. It surprised me so bad that my eyes felt like they were imploding when the light hit me. I didn't want to shield them just yet, though. The fright was turning to nervousness just then. Customers don't pull up to side gates. You know that. I think they were just as shocked to see me standing there with the golf cart and old crates, because nothing moved at first. The lights didn't go off either, and my eyes were getting used to the brightness when I heard the door to the vehicle open with a loud creak. A dark shape moved around the grille of the vehicle, standing like a paper cutout against the sunny old window pane. I could see the arms spread wide and their fingers curled around the chain links, still not saying a word. Then, after a gust of October wind swept up a herd of dead brush, spilling dead leaves and pine needles at my feet, they finally hollered over to me. "Boy, cuz, you must be more about this job than I thought, huh?" The voice was frantically drawing breaths between words, and his sentence tapered off to a weak little laugh. It was Vince Ballenchamp, staring at me like a tiger does a hunter. He seemed half a human now, in the dark and the cold, like the way Dracula did in that movie from forever ago. Shaped like a monster, talked like a monster, and beat his attention down on me like I suspected a monster would. I was bringing the light from my eyes with my hand, giving my best Clint Eastwood look so as to not give away how shit myself scared I'd been. But I didn't say anything yet. I didn't want to go shouting back so my voice would crack and he'd figure something was up. Instead, I watched as he hunkered down to the bike lock on the gate and fumbled at it with his hands. When he'd correctly punched in the 3-digit lock key, he pulled it away in a hurry, tossing it onto the asphalt and trying with all his might to push the gate open for his truck. He cut back to the driver's side of his pickup, leaning into the window and saying something to someone that I couldn't see. He raised his pointer finger past me, directing this somebody out into the field, back into the corner. The truck revved out of neutral and Vinny jogged around the grill again, standing aside for the truck to pass through. He waved at me, motioning for me to do the same and pull out of the way. I did, but slowly, as if doing anything he said from now on had to be done in the most aggressive way I could manage. We both stood against the wooden wall of the tool shed, and I noticed him staring out at the starry night instead of meeting my eyes at all. The truck barreled past us slowly, and I turned to see Barney's pissed-off face looking back, piloting the pickup into the field. The truck carried on, and I watched it drive slow and quietly out onto the snow. Turning back to my cousin, he was pushing against his back, like he was working at a kink or two. His shirt was darkened from the neck down, clearly showing his night had been a physically demanding one. His hair had given out, lying limp in all the places he so often pulled it back. There was stubble digging out from his upper lip and jawline, painting him like some awkward drunk from a vaudeville film. He looked like shit, and as much as I enjoyed seeing him lacking in the looks department, it didn't soothe me to know something was up between these two bozos. He clapped his hands, whistling Dixie before sputtering out something to close the silence. "Wowee, these months are gonna be so damn cold, you know it?" I didn't want to give him any satisfaction in my answering. I felt like I was now getting my shit together, so there wasn't any call to play small talk neighbor with him. "You've really been pulling more than your own share, cuz. I've been watching and I've seen it. You're a mighty team player, and I want you to know I see it and thank you for it." Standing there in the dark, I watched his hand shoot down to his pocket, and he fished around for a bit before pulling out a pack of Lucky Strike red shorts, popping the lid open to offer me one. Now, I'd never smoked before, and I'm not wanted to start necessarily, but feeling like such a big man all of a sudden, I saw the cigarette and got this feeling like it was owed to me. He'd have my ass if you'd seen it. But I took the stogie and leaned over as he struck his Zippo, clumsily pulling back the smoke and giving a few stuttering coughs as it shot from my lips. He carried on though, not taking the opportunity to give me grief for not being able to handle my lungs properly. That's the hit, bud. That's the pride you give me, you know? Treat this all like it should be, a family endeavor, right? I didn't let my eyes leave him, flickering at the ash built on the end of my lucky strike. I'd be digging at my own time if it weren't for you on this project with me. No doubt in my mind. That's why... He pulled his own smoke between his lips, fumbling with the striker on the Zippo until the flame leapt up and charred the tip. A big, sloppy plume of smoke whistled from his mouth like a storm cloud, and I noticed that the cigarette was just dancing in his hand, like he was shaking in his boots. You're my man, Jetty. Sure as shit. The words were slow and sounded like his voice was leaving him. I wouldn't just spring something on you if I didn't know that you could handle it. Like us Bellinchamps always handle it. Like us real men handle things. Now the silence was getting heavy, and I thought about dipping back home, jogging away as to not hear him finish. I need a favor, Jetty. It's nothing big. It'll take 5 minutes of your time. Really, though, no bullshitting. I watched his fingernails tear at the dip of his arm, almost digging through the cloth of his shirt. You see, well, I've got something to do inside here. Finally, I've got the time and resources, you understand? Just need to dot some I's and cross some T's inside here, and, well, you just head down after the truck. Just talk to Barnabas, and he'll get you on the right track. It's nothing really, just a load of garbage that needs help tossing. I'll be down in a few, make sure everything's taken care of. Then you can head home. He was puffing up his chest, like he was trying to get a hold of himself. His toe was tapping like mad though, and I could smell the stink of lies perfume his cigarette smoke. He still didn't meet my eye. All these words out of his mouth, and still, he couldn't bear to look down with me and talk to me man to man. But it wasn't his ego this time. Shit, you'd be hard-pressed to hear a lick of ego in anything he said. He was raspy, out of breath, sweating like a pig, and he seemed to be in an awful hurry. He didn't want to lock eyes with me because he was too scared to. He was hiding something. No hair gel or button-up shirt would be able to hide now. Far off, I heard a brake pad squeeze to a halt, and I turned to see the bright red brake lights of Vince's truck vanish into the dark shade of the Poolhouse. Barney was down there, needing help with something having to do with this nasty black pit, all for Vince's sake. What would happen if he saw something in the water? What if they saw my carload of pool chemicals and asked about it? A red-hot iron was pressing against the nape of my neck this time, and my knees were shaking bad. Whatever manly man, Conan the Barbarian feeling I had was flushed right out of me. I stood there with my back against the wall, tasting tobacco as it flew down my nose and brushed against my tongue. I looked back at Vince, who now looked directly at me. His brow was still, drooping over his eyes. The colour was practically gone from his cheeks, too. His eyes looked like a sick dog's eyes, inflamed and sad. I did what I thought I had to, and I nodded. Not for him and his family talk, not for my job, and not for being a man. I started out to the truck because that thing was in there, and I needed to keep these idiots from getting caught up in the water. To keep them from getting eaten, probably. This monster was my problem, Conrad. Its whole being alive was up to my discretion now, and it was my job to keep it from doing anything else to anybody. The way I saw it, and the way I see it now, there was already one life on my head. Maybe even more, counting all those nameless vandals popping into the Poolhouse for years. But especially that kid, laying on the floor in a puddle of his own skin. That was on me. and now no more, not ever, would be on me again. I needed to get these guys gone, finish whatever silly job they had in mind, and then finish what I came here to do. No more wreck, no more Vince, no more blanket. So off I went, Vince dipping into the rec center behind me, hearing my footsteps crunch into the dry snow, following the muddy tire tracks of Vinny's truck all the way to the pool house. Barnabas was waiting under the big windows, staring out at me with his own cigarette between his fingers. As scary as Pizza Face was, I was more put off by those big, dark panes of glass looking out on me. Funny that this was my last time going in there. I thought I'd feel better about it than I did. But there they were, keeping my newfound way of thinking from getting a start whilst I was under their white gaze. A big cat, Conrad. That's what that whole damn shack is. A big cat in tall grass, watching what it wants live and walk around, not knowing that its big nasty teeth are just waiting to sink in. If Vince was Dracula, then I was walking my happy ass right into his castle, fit with an eldritch guard dog who was just waiting for me to dip a toe into the water. As I drew closer, walking into the shadow the pool house shone against the moon, I watched the cherry of Barnabas's cigarette float in the dark, away from the doors, and it glided over to the back of Vinny's pickup, the shape of Barney reaching a hand under the latch to let down the tailgate. I stopped a few feet away from the bed, Barney turning to me with his back shielding whatever hid behind him.
"You've got the keys, get that door."
I kept my head down and did as he said, just repeating the plan in my head. Get in, get out, kill that thing. As the ring of keys smacked against the big iron lock, I heard Barney shuffling with something behind me. The bed of the pickup squeaked as he tugged at something big, and it dragged gradually off the lip of the tailgate. His hands gripped at it, and I heard the thing shuffle like it was wrapped in canvas, falling to the snow with a fat crunch. Barney struggled with it, breathing heavy with a nasty gargled wheeze, probably from hunks of mucus singing in his air-filled lungs. The snow under his feet let out a snap for each of his steps, and then a growling dragging sound as the thing he was hauling was pulled along. The lock popped with a click, and I swung it around into my palm, tossing it to the ground behind me. The door let open with a loud creak, and I smelt the familiar grog of moss and rot. The pool house let out a massive breath, and I felt warm, wet air stick to my nose and my cheeks. I turned around and Barnabas was there. He was bent over his knees, fighting for breath. At his feet was a bundled black duffel bag. It was huge, about 2 feet wide and 6 feet long. The top material waved around frantically in the cold breeze, like a flag sounds during a storm. He looked up to me, scowling with his fat mouth wide open, pulling the last of his tired breaths.
"Grab a side, jackass."
So I did. The weight was amazing. My arms immediately strained to hold up my side. My fingers burned in the bandages, wrapped around the plastic handle for dear life. Whatever was inside was limp, like I was hauling a deer carcass in a paper bag. I led the way, walking back towards the dark hallway. My footsteps slid across the tile floor. I wasn't able to lift them too high without feeling like I was going to pull something. The dark came on us then, and the light from outside the door spilled only as far as the first few feet into the hallway, leaving us in pitch black, shuffling forward towards the pool room. I felt the bags inside toss and turn, and I imagined blocks of ice slamming together inside. The stitching on my handle was getting slack, and I kept a hold with my crippled fingers. Each step we took, I felt another stitch slip out of its place, and the handle gradually separate farther and farther from the actual duffel bag. I almost spoke up, but Barney's wheezing was loud and determined, pushing me farther along with his hips as he took long strides. I didn't notice when we'd slipped into the hole at first, not until my ears filled with air like I'd gained altitude. The must in there wasn't as strong as it had been before, and I suspected that some of the air was seeping out through that broken window, letting the cold night breeze pull it into the field outside. Not wanting to take a dip backwards into the pool, I shook my end of the bag, motioning for Barney to let up and drop his end. He noticed, but only slowed his gait enough to stop himself shy of passing out. We'd only been at it for a few minutes, and here he was breathing like we'd done a marathon. I let my side of our car go down with care, not knowing or wanting to know how fragile whatever inside was. But Barney didn't let go just yet, just holding his handle at his hip, taking in air like a bike pump dishes it out. I couldn't see him in the dark, but I could smell his breath from just a few feet away. The room was quiet besides him, wind whistling out the room through the door we'd left cracked open. Get in, get out, kill that thing. Get in, get out, kill that thing. Before I could hook my thumbs into my belt loops and stroll back out to the truck, I heard Barnabas wheeze over to me.
Not done just yet, Junior. Pull your ass up and get this thing to the edge.
Barnabas in the light was intimidating enough, but in the dark, he was far more so. Knowing that pimple-faced dope slinger was itching for a chance to get my hide did me no favors. But thinking about how close I'd have to get to the water didn't either. Get in, get out. So I reached back down for the handle again, my fingers recoiling from the sudden pressure on the wound. Just then the handle finally gave away, and the bag fell from my grasp like an anvil in a Looney Tunes episode. It smacked into the floor with a thunk, and I frankly dipped my hands at the canvas of it to reel it back and get it moving. But the cloth had torn where the handle was attached, and my hand fell into the pit it had left. I touched the thing inside, and I felt horrified by the sheer sensation of it. I had planted my hand on a thick scalp of hair, Conrad. Curly hair, too. My fingers swiped at the sticky residue that it left on the tips, and I felt my stomach drop. Barnabas groaned with irritation, and I heard him swing a hand absent-mindedly into the dark between us, trying to lay a smack on me.
Figure it out, you mash-brain needle dick!
He was tired, and he sounded wimpy now that he'd been worn out, but I was still in shock, kneeling down again to feel inside the rib. I slid my hand across the hair again, and I felt a slab of a forehead and a button nose just below. There was a person in the bag, and I felt tiny, shallow breaths brush against my palm. Barnabas, probably not realizing what had happened, grabbed at the collar of my shirt, the seams snapping around my neck. I didn't think about it when it happened, but my injured hand was already swinging into his gut. My aim struck him somewhere between the stomach and kidney, and his head fell onto my shoulder as he barreled over in pain. I didn't mean to do it. It was just some kind of reflex. Hell, I was halfway to apologizing before my brain got a hold of me. Before I could check if he was alright or knock him even harder, his hand latched onto my crotch and he squeezed as hard as he could. The pain shot through my lower body like an atomic bomb as I yelped real loud. No embarrassment in saying, I screamed like a baby. My knee slammed into his face as hard as I could swing it, and I heard something crack in his head. He squealed like a pig, and I heard him finally drop to the floor in a heap, crying over and over, "Ow, fuck, my eye! You broke my skull, man!" I think I might have cracked his eye socket, but at the time I didn't care one way or the other. While he was screaming, I wrenched the bag open at the tear, spreading it wide open with a loud ripping sound. There were those shallow breaths, panting pitifully in the dark. I bent down and lightly felt around for the person's face. Hey, it's alright, I've got you now. It's alright. What can I do? Are you hurt badly?" I didn't get an answer in words, but heard a bated groan whisper from the invisible person. They writhed around a bit in the bag, probably waking up to more pain than they deserved after the way Barney was throwing that sack around. I was still clutching at my pants zipper, praying for the sting to slip away sooner rather than later, when I was snapped back to the present with a boot print stamped into the back of my neck. If you value your damn neck, you'll never let your back turn with a junkie behind you, because his kick sent me flying to the floor like a kamikaze. My forehead met tile with this disgusting splat, and before I even knew it, I'd been hit. I recognized that sweaty, warm steam pooling across my cheek. Stars were everywhere, and bright flashes of white spun me in and out of thinking properly. A voice was speaking from somewhere above me, cutting up his words with little whimpers of pain.
Ow, my eye! My whole head is on fire, you miserable little hick! I'm gonna bury you in this place!
I don't remember exactly if he said that perfectly, but that was the general idea. Not that I understood much of anything that was going on at the time. Curling over like a baby, holding my head in my good hand, I heard his boots scrape along the floor, limping toward me to hang another few hits on my battered shape in the dark. In the confusion, hearing him talk and snarl and listening to my invisible friend moan and come to, I think my brain made a little bit of an autopilot option. I started flailing around the way I remember it. My boots sprung at dead air, hoping to hit him. I won't pretend that I didn't know what was behind him. Picturing that big trench of soup was my only thought at the time. God help me, Conrad. I knew that if I could push him in, that'd be the last of it all. A body in a bag, a vertebrae dislodged, and that disgusting musty odor building up all around me. I knew and I didn't know all at once. I knew I wanted him gone. I knew that me and my new friend were fucked either way. But what I didn't know is how damn light Barnabas really was. I got to my feet before I'd even thought to. I sprung both arms out in front of me like I was heading for a dive off a ledge of the Empire State Building. My head was nuzzled into my shoulder, blood soaking into the armpit of my shirt, and I sprinted at Barney with hell at my back. Truth be told, we both know that hell was definitely in front of me. Barney fell into my arms with a gasp, and our legs tangled together in a crash. My head smacked into his, and I felt the strands of his greasy hair stick to my tongue. My tackle was more than enough effective to carry us both, and in a second we'd caught air. We hovered just a second, probably. At least in Barnabas's mind, I'm sure it was long. But for me, knowing what I'd just done, hours passed in that little moment. The air brushing the hat right off my head, the breeze tickling the wet bits of my face, which was spattered with my own blood. The rot and stink of that shack shooting up my nose at that moment. The water of that pool now closer than I'd ever wanted it to be. My outstretched fingers were the first of me to sink in. But Barney's weight pulled us down fast. The brunt of our impact sent a tornado of rotted piss everywhere, and before I could scream, the water folded over my back like a blanket, and I closed my eyes to pray. There was a short minute where Barney's body kept up the heat against mine, but his struggling pulled us away from one another. Then I was cold, freezing all over. The pool wasn't warm like I thought, but frigid like an ice bath. I was silent, just lost in the whole experience, sinking down, bubbles of my own breath fluttering up to the surface. I wasn't thinking at all. Contrary to what I might have thought, I wasn't really scared either. I can't say the same for Barney, because his yelling back came to me like it was muffled under 6 feet of dirt. It was a weird humming, almost words, but just not quite concrete enough. Almost like singing, kinda. I felt strings of some weird grassy growth brush against my arms and face, long, drowned containers and trash floating up around my head. I didn't lift like you'd think I would. Probably knocked the air out of myself after tackling Barnabas. I was sinking, spread out like a star into the water. I felt the water above me rush and churn, Barney up there somewhere struggling to keep afloat. I think I could have laughed down there, thinking about that big, scary chump screaming for someone to help him out of the water. That was when my boot met the bottom. Thinking about it now, I'm terrified. I don't even know how deep that water was. It could have been 16 or 17 feet. But then I was standing on solid ground, calm as a statue. All my mess seemed to be at the real fever pitch. But I was still coasting along in my own head, white painted all over my mind like a psych ward bedroom. I felt like I imagine it feels a baby, quiet and knowing nothing but the fluid all around me. The water was soaking into the bandages, and the leftover muscle and nerves in my fingers started to scream. I was pulled from my little moment like a yo-yo, everything coming back to me in streams of thought, going 1,000 miles an hour. Then the water shifted. My feet, I thought, were on solid concrete, bottom of the bowl. But as I started to come to, my feet rolled back, the darkness below me slipping off somewhere behind me. I was floating again, the gallons of stuff around me swirling as something down there swam up to the surface. I knew what it was, and I didn't have a choice in just letting the inevitable take its course. I'd known when I rushed Barney, and I was okay with it, I guess. It took me away from it all, the stupid, crazy mess that was boiling up all over. At least I could just let it go. And I felt warm knowing that. But nothing wrapped around me. I wasn't tasting the flesh of that blanket as it used me up for a midnight snack. I was alone. Was it hovering over? Was it sniffing me out? I didn't know. Not until I heard that awful gargled noise from above.